Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar. We have a very special guest with us today, Miss Michelle Friedman of Tea and Tattered Books. Welcome to the Jewish View, Michelle.
Thank you, Dr. Rabbi Simon.
Listen, I wanted to talk to you. Tea and Tattered Books is a used bookstore.
Yes.
And that's why a little bit has to do with Jewish right away, because people always say the Jewish people are the people of the book.
Exactly.
So Jews and books go together. So I guess that's a good subject for the Jewish View. But you know, personally, how did you get into the used bookstore business?
Well, I had been working in the healthcare administration field and being in middle management. It's always the first jobs to go, so it wasn't quite as stable as I would have liked it to be. And, you know, I was kind of tired of working for somebody else, so I thought I might as well work for myself. And I've been reading since I was 4 years old, so it seemed to be a natural fit.
That's interesting. Well, you're in Glenmont, so you're local, so practically neighbors, about a mile away, and we actually have done nice things in the little subjects and seminars about Jewish subjects right in there. But, you know, let's get down to business. There's how many books are there? I don't know, 10 million books in the world over on the Library of Congress. Well, we can't talk about all of them right now, so we'll have that for another time. But, of course, you know, there's, like I say, so many books on Jewish subjects besides to primary sources, for sure, the Talmud and the, I mean, if you want to get into the Hebrew libraries, you know, for thousands of years, that also would fill a building up for sure over here. But on top of that, we're talking, you know, down to earth. We're here in Bethlehem, so we're talking about English books that people can understand over there in their own language. But of course, there's so many books, you know, and Jewish ideas over here that really have to deal with. Do you have any specific one that you'd like to talk about? And
sure. The one that really interested me the most, particularly given the time of the year, is Exodus by Leon Uris. And how it relates to the actual exodus of the Jews from Egypt and the exodus from slavery, where the people were in Exodus, the book by Leon Uris, were leaving, in part of the book they were leaving Russia and the pogroms of Russia in the late 19th century, and they were also leaving Europe and escaping after World War II in the displaced person camps, and going to Israel, and you know how Israel is the center of course,
always
Jewish life. Yes, exactly.
They're always exiting over here. The
Exactly.
Jewish people are always leaving and trying to get to Israel.
And so there's a lot of comparison, I believe, in you know, the book of Exodus and the book Exodus.
Very good. So let's start from the beginning over here, the original.
Well, it's really interesting how there's the, you know, God promised 4 things. He promised to take the Jews out of Egypt, to deliver them to Israel, to redeem them, and also make them free. And it's really interesting that these same themes keep coming up again and again in the book book Exodus by Leon Uris, whereas the Jews are taken out of Europe and they are brought to Israel, and they are redeemed from, you know, whatever may have happened to them there. They're being given a new life in Israel, but it's the point of freedom that seems to be the sticking point in both books, actually. Where are we ever really free? Have we ever really freed ourselves and become the people that we need to be?
It's an interesting concept. I can carry it further, actually. It says about, it's actually a phrase in the Talmud when it's talking about the Megillah, the story of Esther, the book of Esther. And so everybody knows, in 10 seconds, a long story short, is just the Jewish people were in Persia, not in slavery, but they were in exile outside the land of Israel after the destruction of the first temple. And then this evil character, Haman, the prime minister, wants to wipe out all the Jews. And miraculously, making a long story short, they were saved. And, you know, so the story ends up, you know, the Jewish people lived happily ever after. Their enemies are gone, and they're, you know, they have Esther the queen, and, you know, Jewish queen, a Jewish minister like Mordecai. On the other hand, the Talmud says, he says, still we were slaves. You know, we were still in exile. So even though you know, when there's a celebration, Purim today, there's a whole holiday, but it's always a little bit incomplete. It's a very interesting idea that, say, Passover, Purim, so we're always celebrating our freedom or our escape, but it's never fully developed, and that's why the Jewish people are waiting for the Messiah over here to make it a full thing. But it's interesting, like, you have to celebrate your incomplete victory, so to speak. You can't wait for, get everything 100%.
Right, and as it relates to Exodus, the book, um, in the individual character development, they all reach that point, but they still have their demons inside that they're facing up. And a lot of the research that I've done on the book, points to how it was a very forward-thinking book in relation to what's going on in Israel right now, and the same turmoil is also going on in the characters as well. How are they going to relate to each other in this new state of Israel? How are they going to relate to their neighbors? And I think that this also happened in the book of Exodus too, that they left, but they still had to learn how to relate to each other, and also they were still neighbors with Egypt and the surrounding tribes.
It's interesting you're saying about the learning process. Freedom is not so easy. And I actually read, so many years ago, but a sociologist, I thought it was a nice, interesting take, the difference between the Jewish experience from going out of slavery in Egypt compared to the black experience going out after the Civil War, or Emancipation Proclamation, but all right, after the Civil War, of being free. And it was interesting that the Jewish people had 40 years of, maybe you can call it incubation, meaning left alone, let's develop ourselves until we're ready to go. And then 40 years is a lot of years. It's not, 40 days or a, 1, 2, 3, where the black people never had that incubation. It's saying, all right, Civil War, oh, you're free. What do we do? You didn't train us. Now there's training programs, there's things like that. And immigrants, I don't know, they have classes there. Okay, you're free, vote. Let's vote. I don't know. I mean, it's been 100 years or 200 years or whatever it was since we're slaves. My grandfather never knew what to be free, my great-grandfather. And therefore, in a little bit, they're still going through these growing pains a little bit. What means freedom? How can I take the initiative? I'm fully, I have self-esteem, I'm a free person where, they're even I think this so many years ago, it was like from the 1960s, just 100 years later, and they're still trying to a growing process where the Jewish people had an incubation of 40 years to, learn how to be free. And, because it isn't, you think, okay, slave free, and it's nice, but if you're under that mentality for hundreds of years, it isn't automatic.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting idea where you have to be trained almost to be free.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting idea.
Well,
you think you have freedom, you know what you're going to do over here.
Right, but you also brought up the waiting for the Messiah. There's a freedom of spirit and of soul that we're all waiting for as well, that we may not be experiencing it fully yet. That may come in the future.
Yeah, well, now maybe, hopefully it will come, whether it's only when. But, Israel has, it's interesting you bring this up because I'm thinking, because Israel has this situation also, what to do with their freedom, and one of the major ideas, which, I love history, that's why I'm saying it's, if you'd have to ask me my best major or something, I'd say it was history, even though Judaism, like I say, takes in all fields of philosophy, legalistic, being a lawyer, because of the Talmud really covers the gamuts, but I love history. And I always contend, people say it, it's just a known thing in history, what are you learning about old-fashioned things, but you can't understand the present unless you have a history, so
right.
That's the basic line of every historian. I always say that too. People go into the Israeli conflict, I'm saying current events today, and they just jump right into it, and it says, you can't just jump into a subject, you have to know where you're coming from, there's a history there, then you'll be able to come in there. At times we have arguments with reporters, they come in, and I've talked to, international people, and they just, you're stationed in London, okay, London, then now to Israel, and they're reporting on it, you have to take a course, you
Mm-hmm.
can't, and you're talking with authority to people, the reporter says, it says in the newspaper, and these people have as much knowledge of the Middle East, or, they've maybe read a few pages, and, really to understand, and the conflicts that are happening now, it should be, really even I would even say a whole degree in it, a Middle Eastern history before you can rightfully talk about or report on a situation. Or that goes for Europe also, in Bosnia, I don't know, whatever situation can bomb in, and all of a sudden, okay, now I'm talking about Bosnia and the Yugoslavian problem, what's happening there. So I just think, it is all, like you say, it is all a very interesting stream of events that are ultimately connected. But I think Israel also with the Arab conflict, they didn't, just to how to work out their freedom of how they're going to deal with what kind of government they're going to have. So many different conflicts between Arabs and Jews, and then you have in Jews itself, secular and religious. So they're still, it's 50, pushing it 60 years later, about 60 years, and they're still groping with these same problems.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
why I say with the blacks, you think you're away, in time from the problem 100 years ago, but you're still groping with issues, 100 years, 150 years, 60 years later, and if you didn't, finally decide on the course of action, problems just don't go away because of time. If anything,
Right.
they exasperate. Like I say, in the 60s, the blacks rioted, and here you see with Israel. They're still dealing with a situation, and things get worse. If anything, they don't just fade away.
Right. No, and going back to reading up on the history of a place, it was recommended to me before I went to Israel that I read Exodus, and I also the other book that was recommended that I read is the one by James Michener, The Source,
Okay.
which is a real good book that shows kind of the progression of events leading to the Jewish people. And I highly recommend particularly Exodus for people to read that before they go to Israel, because I think people go with some preconceived notions about the way things are there without really understanding where they came from.
Right.
And Exodus is a really good book that gives a real good history of what is going on.
Yeah, I know that even in a more limited, I totally agree with what you're saying, but a limited framework, Israel's so based on the Holocaust. They also, Yad Vashem, there's a Holocaust memorial there, but knowing, where the attitude that was born out of the Holocaust. You're right, it's on a bigger framework of thousands and thousands of years, but even that small framework, people just don't understand. Again, I think even they're fighting for their lives, and they are number one fighting for their lives. They have this kind of attitude, but they also came from the Holocaust attitude where if we don't stick up for ourselves, no one else will.
Right.
So they make some more radical decisions militarily and say, oh, what are you getting so aggressive about? And what are you going? So they have, you have to understand where people are coming from in order to understand them. And again, it's just like this kind of, again, knowing the history where they say Holocaust, no one was there, when we needed help. You don't have any allies. And Israel ultimately feels that way. America's their ally, but is America going to send soldiers there to help them
Right,
out?
right.
They're in a doubt. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't over here. So you never know. So it's important, to know the situation.
Yes, it is. It's very important, and again, that's what I recommend. But I make lots of recommendations in the shop all the time.
Yeah.
Based
People do ask you, it's interesting
yeah.
what to read over here.
Well, for some reason, people seem to think that I've read every book that's on my shelves. And
You're
of
a
course,
librarian over here
with
to
10,000 books, I've just had all the time in the world to read all of those books. And unfortunately, it's not true. But I've read a good number of them, and I can usually make a good recommendation or two.
That's interesting. So that's how many books you have, 10,000?
Mm-hmm.
And you're expanding, or that's kind of...
Always expanding. Always expanding.
Well, there's a room over there.
Oh,
Ultimately, you
plenty
gotta
of
be
room,
full.
yes. Yes.
Yeah, room, but-
There's always plenty of room and plenty of space for people to sit and read or talk with each other and drink tea and socialize. And I'm always available to talk to as well, or
Yeah.
almost always available.
To look for good books over there.
Mhm.
Well, I think that's a service. A little bit, there's nothing, not your fault. I'm not blaming you, but sometimes I see books. That's why we're in a library, studios in a library, and that's why they made libraries at the beginning to cut down the cost. But, I always, use books also. People can't get a hold of books, and they're really expensive. That's what I'm trying to bring out.
Yes.
Maybe it's inflation, and I'm not blaming anything. But bottom line, you have young people who want to read,
Yeah.
and it's just difficult to, pay those kind of prices
Oh,
sometimes.
sure,
That's what it is.
sure.
It's-
And if then the libraries are great. I still use the library from time to time myself. It's just that you have to have the book back in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Whereas you come to Tea and Tattered Pages and you don't need to have the
Yeah.
book back. It's your book, and then you can bring it in and you can trade it in and towards new books, and keep the stock rotating through as opposed
No,
to
it's-
sitting in your house.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good thing over here because I know I've been also like that. I don't have that much time for every kind of book, and then then all of a sudden I got to give back, and I'm halfway done, but I have to, run it back so this way you can take your time about it. So, no, it's an important point. I think. I mean, you feel there's a big niche.
Oh,
People
yeah.
come in and
Yeah.
because there's obviously there's new bookstores to say the least.
Oh,
Those are
yeah.
bigger over here, but
Yeah,
there's a
but
big niche.
there's definitely a niche down there. There really isn't anything in the Glenmont area. And Greenville, I get a lot of, not Greenville, Greene County, I get a lot of people who come up from Greene County because there really is not a lot retail-wise down there. And these people are just starving for books and for a place to go and to sit and read and commune with books.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. I mean, it is an important factor because I remember I had Theodore Bickel so many years ago, but again, and he was bemoaning, I remember, what he was saying about the high price of theater. He's saying, well, again, in different venues that they say that, I mean, a little bit they're saying with baseball games also, so it's sports also, is, you can live on it, but what about the youth? Your only future is with the youth, and if you're going to box them out because of prices, eventually,
Right.
or you have a good thing going now, and he was bemoaning theater. He says, you're not getting the youth going to Broadway. They can't afford such prices. So
Right.
it's nice that you're making money now, but look down the pike, and if people aren't interested when they're young, all of a sudden 40, 50 years old,
Right.
people don't read books. I mean, I would assume, not a educational PhD, but, people didn't read books till they're 40. If they're young, like you said, 4 years old, you're into books. You got to give it to kids when they're young. There's a lot of programs like that,
Right.
even here in the Bethlehem Library, literacy for children, because, it's obvious, 40 years old, all of a sudden, oh, I'm into reading.
Right.
You're not going to get that many people if they're into it when they're young. So it's interesting. That's why I say with books also, you're not going to get kids interested in books if, it becomes so.
Well, I had thought that I
so
would
expensive.
find that children were not interested in books, but I have so many kids who come in and they know the authors that they're looking for. They're reading series of books. They really do enjoy reading. And sometimes I'll even say to the parents, who does the child get this from, mom or dad? And they're like, they have no idea because the child has just picked it up themselves and they really like to read. So it's,
But they're coming to you because you use bookstore.
Right,
'cause it's not that
exactly.
expensive. Well, that's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
You're a necessary outlet because to pay $25, $35
Yes.
a crack, parents aren't going to do
No.
that either.
No.
So that's what I'm saying. It's an important. That's exactly
Right,
what I'm saying.
right.
You fill up a big gap, I think, for people that make things, books accessible. I'm not saying you're in for business, but I'm just saying it's good for the community at large.
Yes,
It's a
yes.
needed thing where you're helping people read, and that's all important.
Right. Well,
I
and
don't
there's
think
something.
people read enough. They say, I don't know how you feel, but you read about newspapers are going downhill. I don't know if that's because of the internet. I mean, there's obviously a
think
big
so.
discussion about that. They don't
And
read
it's
that.
really interesting how the electronic books, the devices to read books electronically, so far they haven't really caught on.
I heard that. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. There's just something about holding a book and turning the pages and, and picking it up and putting it down, and having a bookmark marking your spot. There's just something about it that it
Just
feels
doesn't come
better. It
Yeah.
just, it kind of, it ties you in with the ages and, it just makes you feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you could read anywhere else. I mean, like if people don't have a laptop, also you want to sit in your easy chair.
Right, right. But
It
they
just
come
doesn't
out
make
with
it, yeah.
devices, actually, that you can just hold in your hand. But
Just
they
doesn't
just haven't,
go.
yeah, it's not the same as turning those pages with your
Yeah.
hand.
Yeah, I heard someone say that it just doesn't go. I didn't know what their official take is over here. It just didn't. Because
Yeah,
it would
but
be
so
cheaper on
far-
one hand, but just if you don't like
Yeah.
it, you don't like it. It
Yeah,
just
and
doesn't
so
go.
far they have not taken off. Yeah.
Those electronic
Yeah,
books.
it's a very interesting thing, and I'm sure that there's people who are doing, research and
Yeah.
papers on it. But I just, for my sake, I kind of hope that
Yeah.
they never take off.
Yeah. Well, you can research all you want. It just doesn't go. It doesn't go. Some
Right,
certain things
right.
just don't make it in people's minds, and they have to
Right.
switch to something else over here.
Right.
Is there any subject that people, like you'd say, a one subject that people are more interested? I mean, because I've been in your store, but obviously, like any bookstore, it's subdivided into different subjects. You think fiction, nonfiction? Or?
Well, most people tend to like fiction, and mysteries are a huge seller. Like Clara
Yeah,
loves
my wife
loves
does.
mysteries.
And I don't like that's we're funny people. We're on the most important things. We're on the same page, and other things, secondary things, we're totally different people over there. And I just do not like fiction. I just gobble up real story. I like the truth, and stuff like that.
Yes, history does sell very well too. As you mentioned that you like history, history sells very well too. I have people coming through, and I just don't have near enough history books to satisfy
Really?
the need. So if anybody would like to bring them in, I would be more than happy to talk about some trade credit for those.
You get anything with CDs, or you don't get into, like we were talking about, electronics?
I
Anything,
do.
anything?
I do. There are a lot of people who they travel for their job, so they like books on tape and books on CD, and so I do carry a selection of those as well. I also have a selection of large print books for people who have sight problems, and I pretty much carry everything. I consider everything that's brought to me for trade. There's very few times that I will say no to something, except if I have a few copies of it on the shelf.
Yeah.
Because I want to keep room for other things.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting over here. So, is there any other expansions you think? I mean, like through mail order or anything? I mean,
Well,
to be
my
bigger?
website is up, www.teaandtattered.com, and hopefully within the next year I'll be able to sell books off of my website as well, have a shopping cart feature, so that people can buy books from the website. But if somebody would like to send a book to somebody, they're more than welcome to, ask me, or even a college student, if there's something, they're away at school and they want me to reserve a book for them and it comes in, I will be more than happy to send it to them when it comes in.
And you have everything categorized on, enough to be on computer?
Yes, I have all of my inventory on my hard drive. And
that's pretty good.
yeah. And I mean, it's been a huge task, but I was
Well,
told
most used books, is that a new thing, or you're pretty unique in used books?
it's pretty unique in used books. Most people don't.
Yeah, they just say, I don't think that they have
Yeah,
that.
they have to depend on the owner's memory for what's on the shelf. But I was advised by other used bookstore owners that if they had to do it all over again, that they would have an inventory, so that they
So you
knew.
could do that. I mean, this way, they can't say yes for a book. You can just show everybody what you have.
Exactly.
Surely it's
exactly.
good for the, websites are so important now,
Yes. Yes. So, I'm looking to expand, on the electronic marketplace, and also always looking for, more books, new authors.
That's an interesting thing, because usually you're always a store comes, okay, this is what I can offer. But like you're saying, it's a two-way street a little bit, so I want you, taking in books.
Oh, yeah. No, it's definitely a two-way street, because, I couldn't continue my inventory and keep growing my inventory if people weren't bringing me books as well. And it works both ways. It's a trade-off. I give trade credit in exchange. I'll give between 15 and 20% of the publisher's price back in credit that could be used towards 50% of future purchases, so everybody wins. So there's a little bit of cash flowing into the store so that I can keep the lights on and stay available for people to come into the store and purchase books, but people are also getting my already discounted prices for half price against their
Yeah.
trade credit account.
Oh, so that's excellent over here. So that's why, so it's a two-way street. That's important. Because, for my wife also, I think any person who reads, I mean, if they like books on one
Yes.
hand, then they already have books at home. And if they're saying, hey, look, this is a book, I'm never going to open it up again. It was a nice book. But, just taking up shelf space, why don't I
Right.
trade it in and get a different book, and it's not even going to cost them that much already. So,
Right.
like I
Well,
say.
it was kind of eye-opening when I helped my mom move out of her house into an apartment, and there were just boxes and boxes of books. She had, my father's books from when he passed away, and that she never got rid of over the years, and she had all of her books, and it just, somebody has to clean it out eventually, so you may as well bring
Get
it
something
someplace
for
and
it,
get
yeah.
something for it. Yeah.
No, I think that's important. I mean, people just don't, they even ask me for, which I do with books. And, you don't want to throw those things away, because
Right.
when people, like you say, read, they make some kind of bond with it, and just to throw away
Right,
a book or
right.
something. I know my mother's 35 years, she was a kindergarten teacher in a public school, and I'm from Chicago. And she, sometimes there was some rule in the Chicago public school that I think 10 years, don't quote me on it, but whatever, they had to get rid of math books. She said, well, Hey, she says, science, I know science, but 2 + 2 is 4. What does that make a difference to a, second,
Right,
third grade
right.
book? I mean, a book's a book, and then what changes, but that was the rule because they felt they have new way, new math, new this.
Right.
And she says it would rip her heart out. And they take textbooks, decent ones,
Right.
and just, rules are rules, and they dump them out. Just, oh, it would rip me up over here, So I think that's what any person, even I, books, I just hold on to them, so I'm not going to read it. It's taking up spell, but to throw away a book,
Right.
you just
It's very
don't want to
difficult.
do it. So at least if first of all you're getting credit for it, someone else is going to read it. So it makes it a lot easier over here to do that. over
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Exactly. So.
here. Well, I want to thank Michelle. We're running out of time, but there's another million books, so we can talk about another million shows over here. I mean, whatever. So we will, as Michelle, come back, and it's always good. I love books. I mean, like I say, Jewish people are the people of the book over here. They say in Israel, the book fair is like incredible. That's what you can imagine over there. People like reading. Everybody loves reading. So, I mean, like I say, two-way street. You have books, go over there to Tea and Tattered Books in Glenmont. Number 2, pick up a book. And this way we all love talking about books. And, there's, surely with the Jewish view, we can always find some kind of
Oh, absolutely.
Jewish kind of take on there. There's always something that's going on. I mean, Jewish books are, we can do Holocaust literature. I mean, there's really so much that it can be talked about over here that I just know that, that's why I get frustrated also. Like you say, you'd like to read every book, but, it just doesn't happen. Obviously, you need 100 lifetimes nowadays.
Exactly. Exactly.
There are more books today probably than ever before. Just one last note I think
Probably,
about,
yeah.
it's just, I mean, the knowledge is incredible. That's what I'm thinking. What did they have to learn like 500 years ago or something like that?
Well, not only that, but just the options for getting published are so vast today, because you don't really need to wait for a publisher to decide that they want to print your book. You can self-print your book. Self-publish
put
your own
money out,
book.
though.
Right, you have to put money out, but some people are willing to do that, and some people have been very successful at it as
Just
well.
doing it themselves.
And so, there's just so many different options, and that just gets all of this
Books and
information
books
out
over
there.
there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again, Michelle Friedman, for coming on to Jewish View and talking about your used bookstore. And hopefully we'll come again and we'll be able to talk about another few books.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, and we have our very special regular guest with us today. This is Marc Gronich with the statewide news service. Welcome, Marc, back to the Jewish View.
Thank you for having me back. It's
This
great.
is television, not radio, but all right. I mean, I'm sure you can transfer your media from one thing to
No, I
another. You're good
can.
on camera.
And I service radio stations around the state with customized news from the Capitol.
Oh, good.
And I did that from 1981 to 96, took a little break, and now I'm back doing it again, round 2.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of
Better than
fun.
ever.
And I really had a good start when Governor Spitzer said day one, and day one everything changes. Day one for me was the day one of the administration, also
That's when
January
it started.
1st. That's when I restarted, yes.
So you're together with the governor. Well, you know, there's never a lack for news around Albany. You know, with the states, I'm sure you're constantly busy. There's always some, you know, doings over here, you know, some political ideas. But, you know, we're on the Jewish View, and of course, is Jewish, so I mean, we've had, and you have actually brought politicians, and obviously a Jewish person works in the world, so you care about no matter who is the governor, who's the mayor, who's the assembly person, you know, they're representing us. But here we're very special. Now we actually have a Jewish governor in the state, so we can actually tie it really directly to the Jewish View. This is the first governor, or
No,
what's the history of New York State?
Herbert Lehman was the first Jewish governor.
All right.
And it's amazing in a state that has so many Jewish residents, mainly downstate, but throughout the state, that we've only had 2 Jewish governors. This is the second one. Herbert Lehman was in office during the 1950s. No, 30s, 40s, yeah, in that range. Yeah, it was a long time ago, 60 some odd years ago.
And now we have finally.
And now we have another. But you know, some people say he's a Gino, Jew in name only, because he's, you know, he has not. I found this out through various sources, including through the governor's press office, also confirmed it. But the governor never had a bar mitzvah.
Oh, really?
Now, you know, some people say, and you can confirm this for me or not, but you don't really need to have a bar mitzvah. It's a ceremony, it's pomp and circumstance, but I always thought that you at least had to be called up for an aliyah on your 13th birthday to make it official. Other people have told me since that you just have to turn 13 and you're automatically a bar mitzvah. Now, how does that...
That's true. I mean, bar mitzvah means that you're obligated in the mitzvahs. Just like, for example, you can have your driver's license at 16. So what if you don't have it at 16? You didn't lose any privileges. You have the right to do things. So in a bar mitzvah, it's just that people always do, because if they have the first possibility, you know, I mean, to get driving, it's like, oh, I got to drive on my 16th birthday, or I have to have a drink on my 21st birthday. Of course, you have the right to do it, but, you know, a Jewish person should want to do it. You know, if you have the ability, the privilege to do something, hey, wow, first opportunity, I'm going to do it. The parents should want that for their children. The children should want it for themselves. That's why it's done. Unfortunately, again, a lot of cases that parents don't care about it, and the children, you know, obviously the parents don't care about it. The children aren't going to care that much either. It's just, so therefore, the second opinion is right. It's really not needed. What happens is it's just, if you say the pride of being Jewish, I mean, obviously that's what I'm saying. What happens, not so much legalistic, but what kind of attitude do they have that they just didn't say, you know, I'm not saying that the bar mitzvah is the end all, because a lot of kids have their bar mitzvah, okay, I finished, I'm done with being Jewish, and let me go on with life. Unfortunately, that's also a big attitude, but shows that the parents didn't care enough to belong to any affiliation and give the child any Hebrew school education, and that's really what it kind of shows on a lack of Jewish pride in their own, or actually obviously a lack of Jewish education, because they don't know that much. So how can you live like a good Jew if you don't have the Jewish education? That's pretty much more what it looks upon.
Well, also what was sort of striking for me was the fact that the first place that the governor had a ceremony was at a Presbyterian church on State Street in Albany. It wasn't, you know, he could have just as easily, I suppose, gone to a congregation Beth Emeth if he wanted to go to any synagogue. You know, that wasn't that close. And Herbert Lehman used to attend high holiday services at Beth Emeth when he was governor. But again, in the 30s, the governor, it's a different time. You know, you didn't have easy travel as you do today. You know, the travel wasn't as easy back then. Go back and forth to New York, or to go, you know, to go back to your hometown. I mean, basically, governors back then really did live in the mansion. They lived in Albany. This was their hometown. So, and I'm not even sure that Beth Emeth was on Academy Road at the time. Yeah. They might have been downtown.
Right down a few blocks
away.
Right.
So, but I know that Rabbi Scott Speen, the rabbi of Congregation Beth Emeth, told me that he extended an invitation to Governor Spitzer to attend high holiday services at his synagogue to continue the tradition of Jewish governors attending high holiday services.
What did the
No,
governor respond?
no answer yet, but it was in the midst of many letters that the governor got, so maybe they're weeding through it.
But you think, it's like funny because people say, some senators, whoever they are they friendly to Jews? I said, listen, New York State, my political take is, if you're in New York State, you have to go to some bagel fest or, what I'm saying, some Israeli parade. I mean, that just, whether you're Jewish or non-Jewish,
well,
I mean, that just comes with the thing. So
well,
you would think maybe just for the outward services, hey, I'm Jewish, what are people going to say? Yom Kippur, you're working, what are you in the office, Yom Kippur? So whether he's religious in feeling or not, just from the attitude.
But it goes beyond that now. Right after the inauguration in January, our world-class Jewish weekly newspaper, The Jewish World,
right.
I wrote this back page story, and they used as the headline, "Ethnicity Seen Irrelevant in Rise of Spitzer."
That was your words or their words?
No, that was their words. My words was, being Jewish just doesn't matter anymore.
Really?
That was my suggested title, because everyone who I spoke to for this article here, whether it was the mayor of New York City who's Jewish, or it was a congressman who's Jewish, or it was an elected official who wasn't Jewish, like Albany Assemblyman Jack McEnany, whether I spoke to a Reform rabbi or an Orthodox rabbi, they all said it just doesn't matter whether he's Jewish. His ethnicity, his religion, it just doesn't. It matters whether he's going to be a good governor. It doesn't matter whether he's Jewish. So my headline would have been, being Jewish just doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
If it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. And if you're speaking to the people inside the community, and they're saying it doesn't matter, then it just doesn't matter anymore. And I know that our previous governor, George Pataki, was very proud of his Hungarian heritage and promoted that quite a bit while he was governor. Before him, Mario Cuomo was extremely proud of his Italian heritage. You saw that everywhere. Even in his speeches, he would throw in some Italian words. And before him, Hugh Carey was very proud of his Irish heritage. I remember one time Hugh Carey and U.S. Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, may he rest in peace, they were both singing When Irish Eyes Are Smiling a cappella at the Empire State Plaza during a fall festival that they had down there one October. They were so proud of their Irish heritage. And, but to come here into New York State and get elected to a statewide position, showing that you're not, like you were saying, proud of your Judaism or embracing your Judaism in any way, is a bit off-putting. I don't know. It sort of puts it off a little bit. It's a little off-putting.
The Rebbe once said, it's interesting. He says, a lot of people, I don't know if this is Governor Spitzer because like he's already second generation put off or something.
Yeah.
It's not like his parents wanted him, to have something. I mean, I don't know his parents, but if they didn't educate him, didn't belong anywhere. But the Rebbe always felt, it's interesting about the Rebbe when people would say, well, my Judaism may get in the way of my career. He says, on the contrary, he says, people respect you. Just like you're saying, so respect. You say, oh, those Irishmen. You say, well, fine, you're an Irishman. Be proud of being Irish. There's only respect. And that's why I think, non-Jewish people only respect, people for saying, fine, you're Jewish. I understand it's the high holidays. And they respect that. They won't, look down on that.
And a lot of times it's because people know where you're coming from. It sort of builds a framework for who you are, and they know how centered you are when you say, I'm Irish, Italian, Jewish, Hungarian, whatever. I mean, it sort of gives you a framework, and people like that. They like to know, who is this guy coming at me and talking to me, So I would say that one of the other issues that this, not being bar mitzvahed, or having that ceremony, being called up for an aliyah, not embracing your Judaism, is that his wife is not Jewish. He married someone, Silda Wall Spitzer. She's a Southern Baptist upbringing from North Carolina, and he met her in college, and they, were college sweethearts, and they got married, and they're bringing up their children, celebrating both types of holidays, Jewish holidays as well as, I guess, Southern Baptist or Christian holidays. I mean, I'm not quite sure what they do during the holiday time. may find out in December.
Yeah.
You know, if there's a menorah in the mansion still, I don't know. We'll see. But you know, I mean, there are occasions when the governor traditionally comes to the Capitol, to the third floor of the Capitol, to to address the Chabad community, for example, when around the Rebbe's birthday, I believe. I know that they passed that. Rabbi Butman comes up here and passes out matzah, and he and the governors, Cuomo and Pataki, have both come up to talk to and pay their respects to Lubavitcher Rebbe, but also, you know, to honor Rabbi Butman and all the Chabad community. And I know all the assemblymen and senators who are Jewish or non-Jewish or represent Jewish communities, they come and join in on the ceremony at the Capitol. And it'll be interesting to see this year whether Governor Spitzer, you know, comes up to the third floor to the speaker's conference room and says, you know, hey, I'm here too, and what he has to say in terms of his Judaism at that time.
Interesting,
you know,
yeah.
We'll see if he ignores that. Now, I do know that, you know, on St. Patrick's Day, pardon me, he did go to 3 masses.
Really?
Yeah, he attended mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan, among 2 other places. So, you know, that's a. You know, I know he embraced that. We'll see what else he embraces. You know, again, day one, everything changes. You don't know. But he's 47 years old, and I think by the time maybe he turns 50, so maybe in 3 years, maybe we can do the bar mitzvah for him. You know, maybe we can encourage him to be more sensitive. Maybe you'll officiate. Who knows? Maybe.
We'll could be.
So. That's the.
I mean, your opinion, do you think being, I mean, let's say he would be, let's just a fictional scenario, a person would be very Jewish-minded. Well, you have Speaker Silver, I mean, he's not the governor, he's obviously Speaker of the Assembly. And I just know he does put, I mean, there is things you can do. It's not just, all right, singing a song or going to a holiday, you know, which is nice. But I mean, you know, even legalistic, you know, like even in the Assembly pushing some legislation, I know Speaker Silver does. You know, putting kosher legislation, for example, you know, it's dear to his heart. I'm not saying maybe someone else would also, maybe, because, like, again, there's so many Jews or Orthodox Jews in New York State.
Well, you know, and there's another very religious Jew in the Assembly, Dov Heikind, who represents, I think, Borough Park, right? Yeah. And, you know, I mentioned to Dov Heikind about this. I said, you know, how can you know, usually he's not shy about endorsing Republicans. He's a very conservative Democrat, and he endorses Republicans regularly. And I said, why wouldn't you endorse John Faso, who was running against Elliot Spitzer for governor? And he says, because I didn't endorse Elliot because he was Jewish. I endorsed him because he'd be a good governor. And I endorsed him because of his ideas and his principles. And again, being Jewish didn't matter to, you know, Assemblyman Heiken. Again, when I spoke to any I mean, I wrote this article basically around the inaugural and the State of the State message, because a lot of people from all around the state came to the Capitol. So whenever I saw a rabbi in the halls, I stopped him and I asked him a couple of questions. And I spoke to folks from, you know, rabbis from Orange County and from Brooklyn and from, you know, upstate here. You know, it just didn't matter. They didn't want to get into that whole issue of, you know, being Jewish or Jewish to this extent or that extent or embracing it in any way. It just wasn't a factor for them. And I wasn't necessarily looking at it from a religious standpoint more than an ethnic standpoint. And that's why in the headline here it says ethnicity seen irrelevant in Rise of Spitzer, not religion seems irrelevant.
So you think it's maybe
It's
more correct or
ethnicity.
something?
It's more of the ethnicity, bracing the your ethnicity more so than embracing the religion, because you could be Jewish ethnically
Right.
as opposed to religiously. But he's not. He's very bland on all of that. He doesn't embrace it either way.
But this will say, it'd be interesting to see that maybe as a role, you know, people know he's Jewish, or he knows that people know he's Jewish. Maybe he'll just feel as a role model. I mean, like you say, ethnicity, some people, you know, I say, you know, I don't work on Yom Kippur. Not, you know, I don't religion, I'll do anything, but it's just, people know I'm Jewish, and it doesn't look right. You know, that's how they say to me. You know, it just doesn't look right that people know that Jews should come to work on Yom Kippur. Not that I care about Yom Kippur, not that I even go to the synagogue on Yom Kippur, but I don't want people to talk. So, you know, it's like I say, it's even beyond that. Like he'll say, hey, it's Hanukkah, you know, or it's Rosh Hashanah, I got to do something. People know I'm Jewish. What does it look like?
Yeah.
Here's a Jewish guy who comes to the office on Yom Kippur.
Well, here it is, you know, coming up to talking about budget negotiations and the end of the budget deadline, and will we have a late budget or an on-time budget? And again, Passover is April 2nd, I believe, right?
Right, correct.
And it's 8 days, so it goes to April 10th, if my math is correct. And that Sunday is Easter Sunday, prior to, you know, so it's like the 8th, 7th or 8th is Easter Sunday.
Right,
The 10th is a Tuesday, if I, you know,
Yeah.
have my math correct.
Good.
So people are saying the holiday period ends on that Sunday. They're not considering the last 2 days of the holiday, which is a yontiv. It's just not on the calendar. Passover, it says, you know,
Yeah,
April 2nd. It doesn't say Passover yontiv for the last 2 days. So what's going to happen, you know, in the mindset of the capital? Will there be budget negotiations?
Well, Speaker
you
Silver
know?
won't show up.
Okay, maybe he'll have some impact and some influence that way. And maybe that'll drive the process, you know, and we'll just, you know, extend it an
Free
extra
up
2
before
days.
the
You know, so.
Passover holiday, get it done
But
with.
you know, you know, you mentioned to people who are looking at the calendar to say, and they say, oh, Easter Sunday ends the holiday period. I thought, no, it's April 10th that ends the holiday period. And I show them, I have to bring a Jewish calendar into the Capitol to show them it really is a little bit later than Easter Sunday. So it's a mindset, and the governor could really lead in that regard also, and just to you know, he doesn't have to practice it, but it's an ethnicity type of thing. You know, you just have to be aware of it. It's an education. It's an awareness. So I think that's where the failing is on that side. You know, he wants to be a leader. Well, great, you know, but he can lead in so many more ways than what he's doing now. And everyone says, well, this is just enough. That's good. You know.
It's interesting which way you'll take, but he's still raw, he's still new. I mean, you know,
That's
like you say,
right.
the holidays haven't
That's why
really roll around. This is his first year of experience of
and that's
Passover,
why I said,
Hanukkah.
let's see what happens in December when he, you know, they're traditionally in the executive chamber, they decorate it with a tree, and they also have a menorah. And we'll see and the menorah is very nice. It's oil, and it's an oil menorah, and it's an older-fashioned menorah, and it's beautiful. We'll see what happens there. We'll see what happens if they do the Rebbe's birthday.
He'll show up.
Yeah, if he'll show up for that.
What kind of words he'll say?
Right, exactly. You know, will he be out of town coincidentally? Oh, sorry, you know. Wish I knew about this, you know. Well, it's every year the same day, you know. But you know,
interesting
you know,
how he
and
deals with it.
it's very interesting because I thought that some of these folks who I would have interviewed, you know, would have at least said you know, that yes, you know, okay, would have acknowledged or spoken more about the fact that it is an intermarriage and continuity is such an important part of our mantra of what we're trying to talk more about continuity and less about intermarriage. And here he is, the governor of the state, who's intermarried with another religion.
It's interesting. Well, it just shows even the Jewish mindset because it's probably, unfortunately, so acceptable in Jewish. Because I don't know if you would say 30, 40 years ago. Let's ask that question. Maybe in 1960, let's just in a time machine go back. It's 50 years, you know, 45 years ago, and say, oh, an intermarried Jew, would that go over well in the Jewish community, or it's, you know, and compare that to nowadays where it's just it's not accepted, or it's just say, listen, it's a fact of life.
Well, I'll read to you what Assemblyman Jack McEnany, who's Irish, but I spoke to him about this, and he said it says what direction the country is going in, and that a lot of the old barriers have disappeared. Remember, JFK was the first Catholic president. And I remember Senator Abraham Ribicoff of Connecticut. He says, I remember them writing at the time, 1972, he should have been one of the likely candidates for vice president at that time, but oh well, he was Jewish, and that wouldn't even be considered. 1972. All right? It's not the times they are changing. They have changed. The performance in office that you're going to see from Governor Spitzer is going to further break down barriers that shouldn't have been there in the first place. And he said, speaking as an Irish Catholic and remembering well, I was 17 years old when JFK got elected, There were an awful lot of Catholics who played it down because you were being sensitive to anyone who wasn't of the same background, but also you didn't want to play that up. You wanted someone accepted on their own merits, and I think it's a subconscious thing that you do in anyone who has the same heritage and identity. You try to bring out to other people what he means in the big picture, regardless what his religion may be, by any standard. This is a man with extraordinary promise, McEnany speaking of Spitzer. He's a success with everything he's done, and when you deal with people who are not of the same ethnicity, you want to point out to them that if this were strictly on the merits, he would still be there. And I thought that summed it up beautifully. And but you know, the people, Alan Hevesy, who was the disgraced controller who had to resign from office, he was Jewish. Most people didn't realize that, but he had an intermarriage also. So we've had other statewide candidates who were Jewish who played down their religion and ethnicity. You know.
I mean, it's only a few months into the year, and you, like I say, you're our pulse on the Capitol. Putting Jewish aside, now just pure governor. I mean, I know I've heard that and I've read that from many people. Oh, he's going to be great. He's going to be great. So, you know, it's like baseball a little bit. You know, they're going to be great, and you never hear from them again. I mean, how is in actuality? It's one thing to say who he's going to be.
Well, I'm sort of comparing Governor Spitzer with his first term or first few months with Governor Schwarzenegger's first few months in California. And Governor Schwarzenegger had to learn very quickly how to deal with the legislative process. Governor Spitzer has always been known as a prosecutor. He's always been known as a legal eagle. It's a matter of now saying, all right, now I'm a chief executive, I'm not a prosecutor, I don't have to put everyone under the spotlight all the time. I can assuage them, I can make them feel more comfortable with getting from their opinion to where I need them to be. And he needs to show, you know, the art of persuasion a little bit more and improve the rhetoric. You know, he even said to someone, one of the leaders in the legislature, Jim Tedisco, who's the Assembly Republican leader, you know, that I'm going to steamroll over you. And he's going to be the steamroller. And every time now, that's the big thing, steamroller Spitzer. So they're always, it's that moniker that he got for himself, that he made for himself, that he's a steamroller. Well, people like Senator Joe Bruno, for example, the Senate Majority Leader, he's 77 years old. He says, I'm too old to be steamrolled over. I'll show him how to drive the steamroller, but he's got to learn from me. I'm not going to be steamrolled over, and I'm too old for that, and I don't have anything to lose, you know, by it. So, you know, he's not going to scare me. So there's all these fighting words going on amongst the leaders that are also leading to possibly a late budget. And they all said they want the right budget, not an on-time budget, which means we're probably going into April or May before we get a budget. And a lot of that is centered around health care. There's a big health care issue, that education also, but mainly health care is a big stumbling block.
Because of too much money? That's what's...
They're cutting, well, the Governor Spitzer proposed the largest budget ever, over $120 billion, and increased just about everything, but he cut hospitals. He cut the aid to hospitals. He cut the money that would go to hospitals because he felt that's where the waste and spending is, that's where the fraud and abuse is, and he said that they're just not using the money properly. We need to get rid of giving money to the hospitals and let them fend for themselves. I mean, they can do fundraising, they can do naming rights, endowments, you know, that sort of thing. But they need to figure out a way to do it on their own. But at the same time, just about, you know, healthcare providers love the budget. I mean, all these lobbying groups, the teachers like the budget, but they say we just want more, you know. And the School Boards Association says, yeah, well, you know, the budget's great, and accountability, you know, if the governor is proposing, it probably will be passed, that if school districts don't improve, the school board members could be fired and tossed out of office because they are elected. So the school board members, if they're not responsible and they're not spending the money right and improving the schools, which is their charge, then they could be dismissed before the next election. So that's pretty dramatic. So there are all these issues going on, but the arts groups are happy. They're getting an extra $4 million. They want $5 million. but they got 4, so they're always asking for an extra $1 million, no matter how much they're given more, and there are other groups that just keep saying, we want more money, but we're happy, thank you very much for what you gave us. So it was a very, it's a huge budget increase over last year, or this current year's budget, but it's way above any cost of living or inflation rate, and the governor just, figured he'd start off with that, and as the latest budget negotiations, he's imaging the Senate Majority Leader, the conservative Republican, as being the big spender because he wants to spend more money on the hospitals and to make them whole. So the governor's saying, look, we already spent a whole lot of money, now you want to even spend more, and everyone else is saying we got to cut spending, but you're saying, hey, spend more money, So it's really flipped around. They were like in an alternate universe at the Capitol, where the tax and spend Democratic liberals, are getting away from that label, and they're saying, hey, look, it's Joe Bruno who's been there all the time, like that. So
it's never a quiet, dull moment.
It's never a dull moment. It's always busy.
Your work is, you're never going to be without a story over here.
I hope not, and it looks like, like you said, it's going to be a very interesting year. The governor's also tackling a lot of important issues that normally take place after the budget's passed. Workers' comp reform, things that are not budget-related items per se, but those items are getting agreed upon and approved before the budget. So it may even be just a shorter session, and maybe session would end right after the budget's passed. Might not be much more work to be done after the budget's passed. So, as you would say, stay tuned.
That's it. We're going to have to stay tuned. But we're out of time. But we always enjoy Marc. Either he brings a guest or he brings himself. He always something to say and interesting. Our man in the Capitol over here, so he tells us what's happening. And thank you very much, Marc, of the Statewide News Service over here, and give you our blessing for success in all your endeavors.
Thank you very much.